material sustainability, it means resource sustainability, and it also, the regulation takes care of the social sustainability. On the right hand side you see the chart which shows the regulation on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act from the US, which prevents cotton coming from Xinjiang region in China. And this chart is showing that more and more enforcement is taking place, and therefore the shift in sourcing of cotton to other countries is much more accelerated. We are involved in a big study by the Ministry of Textile, and that is to map India's textile waste supply chain. And here we have looked at the 3 miles of the waste supply chain. The first mile is the collection, second mile is the processing, and third mile is the transformation. What we are seeing is that we lack an organized system of collection which needs to be strengthened. So whether it is a pre-consumer waste or it is a post-consumer waste. So here you see an example of how the textile waste is collected in Switzerland. For example, in every colony, every locality, you have this box where you can discard your post-consumer clothes or footwear and so on, which is then sorted, which means that today the sorters are becoming part of our value chain. Earlier they were part of charities and so on, but now we have to also bring them into the fold of our industry. Water. That's the second big dimension for a country like India or for the entire subcontinent, because we have a big deficit in terms of groundwater. This was a book written by my good friend Bridra Ramesh, who's so passionate about water. So she wrote this book about a few years back, which shows how the next battles will be about water. And if we do not conserve the water properly, big challenge will be how do we process our fabrics, how do we take care of the wastewater and so on. So on the right hand side you can see that the requirement for water in the industrial use is going to increase, although still today it is mainly for our agriculture. There's a study which has been conducted by the government of India which shows the total demand for water for various industries, and in which textile is among the 8 big industries after power and electricity, which use a lot of hydro resources. So water is going to be one major issue besides materials that we'll have to contend with. Already companies in the world, they are doing a lot, and we looked at the ESG commitments and the ESG focus of 5 more than $1 billion companies, including our own like Arvind, Vardhaman and Wellspun, and they are focused on reducing the consumption of water per kilo of fibers that they process, and also how to recalibrate and reutilize the wastewater and bring it back into the system. Regenerative cotton. I was speaking to the textile commissioner before the meeting, and we talked about regenerative cotton because the Ministry of Textiles is engaged with the International Cotton Advisory Committee about how to improve productivity of cotton and how to make it profitable for the farmers. So regenerative cotton is a technique which is not new, but it is being repopularized. In plain English, what it means is that you restore the health of the soil so that whatever nutrients you have taken away, they have to be put back into the soil so that it remains neutral. So this regenerative cotton improves the productivity, and this is an experiment which is being done by Olam in more than 100,000 hectares of cotton that they are growing in Cote d'Ivoire in West Africa, where they were able to increase the yields by more than 50%. So it is good for the farmer, it is good for the earth, and this is what the brands and retail they require. Digitalization, how technology is becoming mainstream for our industry. This is an example of traceability, which also Mr. Rajagopal mentioned about the Kasturi cotton. This is an example from Hugo Boss, which is able to trace the entire cotton from the seed right. It is about creating these smart factories, where there is a confluence and congruity between people, processes, and machines. This is an example of a factory that we are designing in Sri Lanka for one of the big groups, and it's a fully digital factory. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at the convergence of these trends into 34 trends, which is the new integrated business model, where we have to take into account all these changes in order to be successful in the modern textile value chain. Okay, let's now descend from this 33,000 feet to a helicopter view, and let's look at our own industry. And I would just like to take this opportunity to look at what has happened in the last 10 to 12 years, and based on the vision that has been expressed by the government, what will it take to reach there? This is how the Indian textile industry has evolved over the next 1 decade or so. And these are the numbers from the India's GDP, which the chairman, Mr. Goenka, mentioned in the morning, earlier in his speech. So the size of our industry, which is currently at about $176 billion, it has been growing at about 4%. This includes the domestic demand, that's the value of the domestic output, plus the exports, that's about $35 billion. Now, if we continue to grow on the business as usual basis, we will end up with approximately $234 billion by 2030. But our goal is ambitious. It's to reach $300 billion. So if we have to achieve that, we have to grow at 10% every year. It's very difficult, but not impossible. But we have to work towards that. As far as the opportunity is concerned, it's already there. I mean, the game is how do we grab that opportunity, and how do we generate investment in the industry? How do we become part of those supply chains, and what will it take? To achieve this kind of growth, we have estimated that we will need an investment of something like $125 billion over the next 10 years. And this investment will have to be across the value chain from fiber production. For example, we will need about 25 million tons of fibers in the next 10 years, both synthetic as well as natural. We don't have much more area to grow cotton, so where will these fibers come from? These are all the big questions. We don't have to find answer to that, but it's something to provoke our thinking that the opportunity is there. It is the competitive supply that we really need to gear to create employment, to create exports, and also to boost the economy. Some of these slides you will see a little bit of French, but not too complicated. What we feel is it is very important for the public sector, that's the policy makers and the private sector, to really understand how does our industry work. The international market is really dominated by no more than 100 companies. Out of that, you have 20 big companies, and then there are few small companies. So about 100 companies, they control this 1 trillion trade in textiles and clothing. So that's the size of the market, about 2 trillion worth of market, out of which 1 trillion is in international trade. So this is the first side on the demand side, to understand where is the demand, who is our customer. So these are intermediaries, these are the buyers, and these are the distributors. Then comes the supply. 90% of the supply today is in Asia, and it is very difficult to disrupt this supply, so it is likely to remain in Asia in bulk. So you have these 4 tiers of the industry. Tier 1 being confection, that's garment manufacturing. Tier 2 is fabrics. Tier 3 is the yarn manufacturing, both man-made fibers and the short staple spinning. And then you have the catalysts and facilitators, and that's where the role of the government and the other institutions comes in. But at the end, it requires huge cooperation between the public and the private sector. And I think today's forum is a great example that we have the policy makers and the industry and the facilitators sitting together to find the solutions and to brainstorm about how to crack this opportunity. As far as the Indian value chain is concerned, we can really summarize it into these 7 pillars to create this or to achieve this $300 billion vision. First of all, to generate investment, we will need incentives, because capital has to be deployed, and it will be deployed where the profits are the highest and where the incentives are the highest. Second is the supply of raw materials. As I said, from the current level of about 12 million tons, we will need to double the production of raw materials, about 25 million tons. So this will need to be made available. Third is the market access, both preferential and into the domestic market. We will need huge amount of human capital and skills. The mega textile parks will offer some of the world-class infrastructure that is needed. And then finally, we will need policies, many of which are already in place, both at the federal, central, as well as at the state level. So this ecosystem will have to work very efficiently in order to achieve that and realize that vision. We've been having various sessions with the Ministry of Textiles and with the private industry, and we have tried to condense what is needed into short, medium, and long-term measures. And these measures would have to be put into place over the next 10 years. Some of these will need to happen immediately, but some over a period of time. The first is to remove the irritants, because the industry faces many irritants or roadblocks. So these need to be addressed. Let's call them as the hygiene factors. The second is the industry needs to be consulted. The government cannot make policy sitting in the Ministry of Textile, which is why we are very happy that the Textile Commissioner is here. And this consultation is very important. There has to be database. We need to strengthen our data. What is happening where? What are the prices of raw materials? What is the productivity in Brazil? What is the productivity in India, and so on? The data is very important. What is the utilization of the industry? So it's based on data that we will make decisions. The midterm measures, first is the investment, and especially the investment has to be driven by the garment industry. We need more and more garment factories, which will be really the engine for growth and sustainability. Sustainability is not something that the industry can achieve alone. There need to be a public-private cooperation, and this is where we must recognize that 90% of our production comes from clusters and SMEs. So we need to strengthen their capabilities through recycling hubs. They cannot manage the water situation or ETPs on their own. So the SMEs will need a lot of help and public investment. And the long-term measures, of course, need the market access. Productivity of cotton will need to be boosted, because we will need at least 10 million tons of cotton in the future. And that cannot come from the area, it will have to come from the yield. Capacity building, labor reform, and cluster development. These are some of the long-term measures. But we need to put in place this ecosystem to achieve that ambitious target. So this, ladies and gentlemen, was about some of the trends and the takeaways for India about the Bharat Tex. We are very thankful to the organizers for giving us this opportunity to be the knowledge partners for Bharat Tex exposition. I think this is a great opportunity for India to showcase its capabilities as a sourcing destination, but also as an investment destination, and this is what Bharat Tex will be all about. About Gearsey, I'm not going to speak much. Everyone knows about that, but with our experience and with our history, we are here to help the industry grow and take advantage of these disruptive trends. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the detailed insight on the Bharat Tex and about the global trends in the textile industry. Our Additional Secretary of Ministry of Textiles, Shri Rohit Kansal, was about to be a part of today's show, but due to some unforeseen situation, he couldn't make it. So he has sent his warm regards and best wishes to all of us. And we'll be moving to an interactive session, the most exciting part of the event, that is the Q&A. I request our esteemed dignitaries to kindly be a part of the Q&A round. I request Shri Badresh Dodia, the Chairman, Matixil, Co-Chairman of the Core Committee, Bharat Tex.